when we are having these conversations with people about how we start doing these things, right? You have an organization in place. This is what you all are doing. So how does this start? Like, how do you initiate this? Do you start with one policy? Do you start by having conversations with the community to determine something in particular that affects the community that you can backtrack to a policy that you can then fight about? Like, what is the initial step for creating these independent structures? Because I find that that is where the real, like, that's where the crux is, right? Like, how do you get people to understand that the reason they don't have clean water is because there is a policy that got put in place that allowed the water to come from a place it wasn't coming from before, and no one was able to really follow that that was the path that led them to having unclean water. So I don't know if that's too loaded of a question, but like, does that make, am I making sense with what I'm asking?
Yeah, no, and I think your question gets at the heart of something. The question of how do we think about, talk about, and address ourselves to the larger political landscape, and how to get people to address themselves to the political landscape in a way that counters the way that the, I think, larger society wants folks to engage the larger political landscape. I think the propaganda that we get in this society is a largely, it is preserving the status quo through giving people limited options politically, right? And so I think, so I would say a few things. And what I'm about to say, again, it sounds simple, but I think just from experience at this point, people got to see it. Like I would argue that LBS is in the position that we're in, being like, there are no limitations on the things that I can say. We published something the other day about Zionism and white supremacy, and we talk about like like we name names of like, former state senators, a person from APAC, a council person, we are able to be free Black people with our politics, but be a force in local and state politics. And the reason that we've been able to do that is because the years of like people just seeing stuff happen. So anyone that's like really interested in radical politics that wants to move the needle, I think a part of it is people just got to see, because what happens is that the reactionaries, the moderates, they come into the community, they sell the community on their perspective, and a part of how they're able to get support is people see, they said that they was going to build a playground, and there's a playground now, right? They said that they was going, do community cleanups. Now, the community's cleaning. So it's literally like people have to see something, right? Like something material. And so with us, it's like over time, people have seen, in the beginning, like smaller things that built up into things that were more substantive. And there are things that we've been able to do that people can literally see, experience, like quantify the impact that it's had on people's lives, right? So there are examples of organizations who Black grassroots organizations that have gotten more resources because of stuff we've done, right? There are folks who would have been more susceptible to be sucked up by the criminal justice system that now have alternatives as a result of stuff we've done, right? There are folks who have been able to, get access to certain kinds of expungements because of work we've done, right? Like real material things. Like even one of the big things we worked on during the last Maryland General Assembly was, legal recreational cannabis is legal. We made it so that law enforcement can't solely use odor as the basis for stops and searches, right? And when I would talk to people in the community, it's like, yo, that's big. Like that's how. And that bill wasn't supposed to pass. Like it passed on the very last day. It was the last bill to pass, like 11:53 at night, like last day of session. And people are like, yeah, that's impactful. Like my homeboy got caught up because they said they smelled it, and right. So my point is that I think answer your question is that like those who are interested in building organization and building political formations that want to move the political landscape further in our direction, I think a part of it, and it's not a satisfying answer, right? It's like people just got to see it. You got to do things that people see, feel, and experience, and then see what I feel like happens with me is like I'm able to talk about like the politics that like we ascribe. I'm able to talk to people about those politics because they're like, I've seen you do stuff, so it must be legitimacy to it, right? There's a way. I'll give another example because I think it's really important. I think to your question, like how do we navigate politics differently? So Baltimore is the Democratic Party stronghold, as is many urban cities, right? And so primary is basically the general. Senator Joe Carter, right? State Senator Joe Carter, right? She represents 41st District, Northwest Baltimore, the most radical person in the Maryland General Assembly. So like our reparation stuff, all our criminal, like all that stuff, she's usually the primary sponsor, right? And she has a whole story to tell about how the O'Malley Democratic Party machine literally tried to destroy her. So that you know, at some point y'all should have her on to talk about that story. And there is a contingency of Zionists in her district. So her district, there's like a third of it that's like Zionist, and then the rest of it majority Black, right? With some other, you know, some other stuff mixed in. And so again, in Baltimore, the primary is the general. The Zionists that want that seat. The Zionists been coming after her, and the right wing has been coming after her all 2023 because she moved some juvenile justice stuff that made it so that there were some alternatives to incarceration for young people that, you know, got swept up by law enforcement. And so as a result, they want her seat. So Fox 45, Sinclair Broadcasting, you know, WBAL radio, all 2023 been saying Joe Carter wants you to get carjacked. Joe Carter's the reason why y'all are getting robbed. Joe Carter's the reason why crime is up, right? Like literally like every day, right? We're clear that that's a part of the strategy for them to take that seat because she's pushing the legislature way further left on these issues than she would like to, right? Now, and in the middle of 2022, she asked me, she said, Davon, we need a slate to run for state central committee in the 41st Democratic Party State Central Committee in the 41st District because they want to be able to control. And the real function of the State Central Committee is if a person retires in office, you appoint the people that come in, right? So her point was we need people in those seats so that when someone steps down, they're not putting their people in, we're putting people in with our politics, right? And so, you know, so I ran for State Central Committee. I'm on the State Central Committee right now. I don't speak for them. People even barely know that I'm on it, right? But what I know is that positioned us to be able to put folks in that seat, you know, that are able to reflect our politics, right? So we're able to put somebody in there that can help, you know, pursue. And I give that example because, again, people observe that. People are like, oh, that's smart. You all made sure that there was somebody in that seat that was going to continue legislating in that way, right? So I'm saying these are examples of the kind of things that, you know, people observe, and it's like when people see it, that's what I think brings people closer to our position. So I hope that answers your question. I know I kind of went on.
No, it's good, but so there's still the one piece of like, how do you, like, where do you start, right? Like I'm still, and this is the part that's so difficult because what we get a lot, and what I get a lot, right, is people who say, like, people don't have time for that. Nobody's listening to that. People don't think you're crazy, da 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 da. So I'm still trying to determine, like, backing up from where LBS is right now, right? If you could step backwards for me and you might not be able to answer the question, right? Like maybe it's just that you had enough people who were smart enough and clear enough and able to pull it together enough that you could start and say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to attack this thing first, because you have to get to a place where you've gotten things done in order for people to know that you can get things done, right? You didn't start off like here's all the stuff that we were able to do. You started off by making the determination of, here are the things that we are going to, this is how we're building our path to being an organization that is reliable in the eyes of the people in the community so that we can continue to push forward. So I'm still trying to understand, like where do you start that from, right? Because it's, there has to be a starting space of, okay, this is the thing that we're going to attack first, and the goal is to continue to build off of these things so that we can move forward.
Yeah, I think the simple answer is, the work we did on the front end to get to the place of doing things sucked. Like the beginning of like actually having to, go to all these community meetings, like raise issues, be ignored, no one care, so a part of what I would say to that is that, what we did was, one of the first things we worked on, the state of Maryland was going to build a $104 million juvenile detention facility in East Baltimore. I think, Jared, you were at the Youth Justice Sunday that year. And so that was like one of the first major things we did, and we focused on that. And that was hard, right? And the work it takes to insert yourself into a struggle with all the different forces that are more powerful than you, that have more notoriety than you. It's the hard work of building a thing. And it starts with that. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier. It starts with, you just got to pick something. And what we did was we picked the youth jail, right? But we started with, we're going to stop this youth jail from being built. And it was a multi-year effort, right? And fortunately for us, it was success. It took 3 years. It was successful, right? And then that allowed us to build. So even after that, we fought the youth jail. There was a local NAACP awards thing, like November of 2013. Senator Carter was Delegate Jill Carter then. She introduces us to a woman named Chris Brown, who's the mother of a gentleman named Christopher Brown, who was killed by an off-duty police officer in Baltimore County. She says, hey, y'all want to help us with some policing stuff? We're like, cool, right? And that became another thing that like we worked on. And again, we're still at this stage. We're not nobody. People don't know us like that. We're just all super young, right? In our 20s. And so, and this is what I'll say. I think that particularly now, with the emergence of like social media and YouTube activism and all that stuff, I just think people really don't want to do that work. People don't want to do that work because it's hard. And to do it in the way that aligns with our worldview and politics, like that shit is hard. You know what I'm saying? And it's the kind of stuff that, there's some deep wellness that you got to do for yourself, in order to do the work the way we do it. You gotta have the proper perspective and knowing that some of the stuff that I'm doing now is not gonna matter until 10 years from now, when, in the future. And, people don't want to do that, which is often frustrating to me. Because to me, it seems like there's a willingness to have conversations, but not nearly as much interest in like the work it takes to make those conversations actually impactful on the world, right? And that is kind of a general frustration of mine. But yeah, to your question, the best way I can answer it is pick something, do it, and it's going to suck. Like, it is going to suck.
That's the clip right there.